Under the red glow of the setting sun, the people of the settlement whispered that she was cursed, blamed for every misfortune since her birth. Shunned and alone, she wandered the edge of the mesas in sorrow. That very night, an Apache chief, guided by a vision in the sacred smoke, rode across the canyon to claim her as his wife. In a ceremony beneath the stars, he declared her blessed by the eagle spirit and vowed to restore her honor. As they shared fire songs and the old dances, she learned that true strength comes from the heart, and that love can banish even the darkest of shadows. But could their forbidden love survive the hatred of two worlds determined to tear them apart? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The broken pieces of Sarah Morgan's favorite clay vessel lay scattered across the dusty floorboards of Prescott Trading Post, each shard a mirror to the fractured life she'd come to know. Her fingers trembled as she knelt to gather the pieces, aware of the hushed whispers and darting glances from the other customers. Mrs. Whitaker, the merchant's wife, had already drawn her shawl tight and stepped back, as if Sarah's very proximity might bring misfortune. "I'll pay for it," Sarah murmured, her voice barely audible above the creak of wooden planks and the distant toll of the settlement's bell. She reached for her worn leather purse, the last gift from her mother before the fever took her 5 winters. "Hast. Leave it," Mr. Whitaker commanded, his weathered face set in stone. "Just leave. We'll add it to your account." The account they all knew she could never settle, not when most folks refused her work or services. Sarah rose slowly, dignity straightening her spine despite the familiar ache in her chest. At 28, she was neither young bride nor respected. Widow, but something else entirely, a woman apart. Her dark hair, streaked prematurely with silver, was bound simply at her nape, and her eyes, an unusual shade of amber, seemed to unsettle those who dared meet them directly. The summer of 1875 had brought drought to the Arizona Territory, and with it a fresh wave of suspicion. 3 cattle dead in the Petersons' north pasture, a well gone suddenly dry on the Martinez homestead, even the unseasonable frost that had withered the early corn, all laid at Sarah's feet by those who needed someone to blame. Outside, the mesa's red walls rose like ancient guardians against the harsh blue sky. Sarah paused in the shadow of the trading post's porch, gathering her strength before the long walk home. Her small cabin lay at the settlement's edge, as close to the canyon lands as one could build without risking Apache raids. "The Lord tests our faith in mysterious ways," Reverend Harrison's voice carried from nearby, where he stood with several members of his congregation. "But we must be vigilant against those who might harbor darker influences." Sarah's hand instinctively went to the prayer book in her pocket, its pages torn and dog-eared from years of seeking comfort in its verses. She'd long since stopped attending services, tired of being the subject of sermon examples about sin and divine punishment. Even now, she could recite the whispered stories that followed her like faithful dogs. Born during a blood moon, her mother dying in childbirth, her father lost to Apache arrows before she took her first steps. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows as Sarah made her way through the settlement. Children playing stick and hoop games scattered at her approach, called inside by anxious mothers. Only old Thomas, the half-blind carpenter, offered a gentle nod as she passed his workshop. Perhaps it was the drought affecting everyone's temperament, Sarah thought, or maybe the increasing tensions with the Apache bands that moved like shadows through the canyon lands. Fear had a way of finding faces to wear, and hers had proven convenient over the years. At the edge of the settlement, where cultivated fields gave way to wild sage and yucca, Sarah paused. A lone eagle soared overhead, its wings spread against the deepening sky. Something stirred in her chest, not the familiar pain of rejection, but something older, wilder, the same feeling that sometimes woke her in the night, calling her to the canyon's edge with dreams she could never quite remember. She reached her cabin as the sun began its descent behind the western mesas. The simple structure, built by her own hands after no one would help, stood as testament to her resilience. Inside, dried herbs hung from the rafters, remedies learned. From her mother's scattered notes and her own careful observations of the desert's offerings, these same herbs had once earned her a measure of tolerance, back when necessity overcame fear, and folks would slip to her door in the night, seeking help for ailments they dared not bring to the settlement doctor. Sarah lit her lamp and settled into her evening routine, trying to ignore the newest weight of today's incident. But as she prepared her simple supper, the broken clay vessel at the trading post seemed to prophesy something deeper than mere misfortune. Change was coming. She could feel it in her bones, in the restless wind that stirred the canyon shadows, in the eagle's cry that still echoed in her memory. What she couldn't know, as she sat alone in her cabin that evening, was that at that very moment, in a camp hidden deep within the canyon lands, an Apache chief named Running Wolf was breathing sacred smoke and seeing visions of a woman with silver-streaked hair and eyes like amber fire. The sacred smoke rose in spirals from the medicine lodge, carrying Running Wolf's prayers into the star-filled night. Around him, the ancient songs of his people whispered through the cedar branches, their rhythms as familiar as his own heartbeat. Before him lay a single eagle feather, not just any feather, but one that had fallen at his feet that morning as he prepared for his vision quest. Gray Fox, the aged medicine man who had guided 3 generations of chiefs, sat in silence across the fire. His weathered face, lined with the wisdom of 8 decades, revealed nothing as he watched Running Wolf breathe in the sacred herbs. Only his eyes, sharp as obsidian, betrayed his keen interest in what the spirits might reveal to the young chief. Running Wolf had earned his name in battle, leading his people with a mix of tactical brilliance and measured wisdom that belied his 32 years. But tonight he sought answers to a different kind of conflict, one that haunted his dreams with images he couldn't understand. The smoke thickened, and the walls of the medicine lodge seemed to dissolve into the night air. Running Wolf closed his eyes, but the visions came clearer still. He saw an eagle, larger than any he'd ever encountered, its wings spanning the width of the canyon. But as he watched, the eagle transformed, its feathers becoming strands of dark hair streaked with silver, its eyes shifting to a strange burning. "Amber, what do you see?" Gray Fox's voice seemed to come from a great distance. "A woman," Running Wolf answered, his voice deep and measured. "She stands at the edge of the settler's world, but her spirit dances with our ancestors." The medicine man's breath caught slightly, the first sign of surprise he'd shown all evening. "The spirits have spoken of her before," he said carefully. "In the time of my grandfather's grandfather, it was prophesied that a bridge would come between our people and the settlers, one who carries 2 spirits marked by the eagle's blessing." Running Wolf's vision shifted again. He saw the woman clearly now, standing alone near a simple cabin. Around her, shadows of misunderstanding and fear swirled like storm clouds, but above her the eagle circled protectively. Her isolation called to something deep within his warrior's heart, a recognition of strength tested by solitude. "The settlers fear her," Running Wolf said, watching the images unfold. "They call her cursed, but their eyes are clouded. They cannot see what she truly is." Gray Fox reached for his own medicine bundle, withdrawing a small object wrapped in deer skin. As he unwrapped it, Running Wolf recognized the distinctive pattern of an ancient stone pendant, one said to have been carved by the first medicine man to receive the prophecy. "Our people stand at a crossroads," Gray Fox said, his voice heavy with the weight of generations. "The soldiers press closer each season. The settlers spread across our hunting grounds like locusts. Some of our young warriors cry for blood, while others speak of submission." He held up the pendant, letting it catch the firelight. "Perhaps this is why the spirits have chosen this moment to reveal her." Running Wolf watched as the stone pendant seemed to pulse with an inner light, its pattern matching the rhythms of his vision. He saw himself crossing the canyon, saw the moment, A first meeting saw the potential for either great healing or terrible destruction. The eagle spirit does not choose lightly. Grey Fox continued, "If she is indeed the one from the prophecy, your paths are meant to cross. But remember, young chief, prophecies are like rivers. They show us the direction of flow, but the path they take to reach their destination can change with each rain." The vision began to fade, but not before Running Wolf saw one final image, the woman standing beside him in the sacred circle, her spirit burning as bright as any he'd ever witnessed among his people. The eagle feather before him trembled, though no wind stirred inside the medicine lodge. As the last of the sacred smoke dissipated, Running Wolf opened his eyes. The first light of dawn was beginning to paint the eastern sky, though it seemed impossible that an entire night had passed. He reached for the eagle feather, feeling its power pulse against his palm like a second heartbeat. "What must I do?" he asked, though in his heart he already knew the answer. Grey Fox began gathering his medicine bundle, each movement deliberate and charged with meaning. "The eagle has shown you the path. Now you must decide if you have the courage to walk it, not just as a warrior, but as one who might bridge two worlds." Running Wolf stood, his decision already crystallizing like morning frost. He would ride out that very day, following the eagle's guidance. Whether this path led to triumph or tragedy, he knew with bone-deep certainty that he could choose no. Other dawn painted the canyon walls in shades of amber and rose, as Running Wolf prepared for his journey. In his medicine pouch, he carried the sacred eagle feather and a pair of beaded moccasins, crafted by his mother before she passed into the spirit world. The intricate beadwork told the story of bridges between worlds, sun and moon, earth and sky, past and future. He had never understood why she insisted he carry them, until now, his most trusted warrior, Swifthawk, approached as he mounted his paint horse. "The soldiers have been spotted near the northern passes," he warned, his voice low. "3 patrols in as many days." Running Wolf nodded, understanding the unspoken question. It was dangerous for the chief to ride out alone, especially toward settler territory, but the vision's pull was stronger than any earthly concern. "Watch over our people until I return," he said. "If I am not back by the next full moon, follow the wisdom of Grey Fox." The journey through the canyon lands required all of Running Wolf's skill. He chose paths unknown to soldier patrols, moving like a shadow through narrow defiles and across exposed ridges. His horse, trained to step surely and silently, carried him through places where the canyon walls seemed to whisper ancient secrets. By midday, he reached a high point overlooking the settlement. From here, he could see the scattered buildings, the newly planted fields, the thin trails of smoke rising from chimneys. And there, at the very edge where civilization met wilderness, stood a solitary cabin. Running Wolf withdrew the eagle feather from his medicine pouch. It trembled in his hand, pointing toward the cabin like a compass finding true north. As he watched, a figure emerged, a woman with silver-streaked hair, moving with a grace that seemed out of place in the harsh landscape. Sarah Morgan stood at her cabin's edge, hanging herbs to dry in the afternoon sun. Something had woken her. Before dawn, a dream of eagle wings and sacred smoke that left her restless. Now, as she worked, she felt a presence watching her, different from the usual hostile stares of settlers. She turned slowly, her eyes drawn unerringly to a high point along the canyon rim. At first, she saw nothing but sun-painted stone. Then, like a mirage taking solid form, she spotted the lone rider. Even at this distance, their gazes locked with an intensity that made her breath catch. Running Wolf felt the connection like a physical force. The woman's amber eyes seemed to pierce the very veil between worlds. Without conscious thought, his hand went to the beaded moccasins in his pouch. His mother's voice echoed in memory. "Some gifts are meant to be carried until the right moment reveals itself." Sarah knew she should flee inside, should sound an alarm. Apache warriors this close to the settlement meant danger, but something held her rooted to the spot, a recognition that defied explanation. The stranger's presence felt less like a threat and more like an answer to questions she'd never dared to voice. Running Wolf began his descent, choosing his path carefully, not to avoid detection, that time had passed, but to demonstrate peaceful intent. He rode openly now, his weapons secured, the eagle feather held before him like a talisman. The distance between them closed with the inexorable feeling of destiny fulfilling itself. When Running Wolf finally reined his horse to a stop, a respectful distance from her cabin, the late afternoon light set the eagle feather ablaze with golden fire. Sarah found herself stepping forward, drawn by a force as natural as gravity. Words rose to her lips, not English, not even the broken Spanish she'd learned from Mexican traders, but something older. A greeting in Apache that she had no memory of learning, yet knew as surely as her own name. Running Wolf's eyes widened slightly at her use of his people's tongue. He dismounted in one fluid motion, his moccasins touching the earth without a sound. From his medicine pouch, he withdrew the beaded pair his mother had made, holding them out like an offering. "The eagle spirit has shown me your path," he said in his own language, knowing somehow that she would understand. "It runs alongside mine, if you have the courage to walk it." Sarah looked at the moccasins, their beadwork catching the light like stars. In their pattern, she saw her own story, written in a language she was only beginning to understand. Her hands trembled as she reached for them, not from fear, but from the profound sense that in this moment, everything she had ever been called, cursed, outcast alone, was being unmade. As twilight deepened into dusk, Sarah stood at the threshold of her cabin, the beaded moccasins cradled in her hands. Running Wolf had withdrawn to make preparations, leaving her with a promise. "When the evening star touches the canyon rim, I will return. The spirits themselves will witness what must come to pass." Inside her small home, Sarah's fingers traced the intricate beadwork of the moccasins. Each pattern seemed to whisper stories of a people she somehow knew, though she had never lived. Among them, memories that weren't her own flickered through her mind. Women working beads by firelight, singing songs that made the stars dance. The sound of approaching hoofbeats drew her outside. Running Wolf had returned as promised, but he wasn't alone. Two elderly women rode with him, their faces weathered like the canyon walls, their eyes bright with wisdom. One carried a bundle, wrapped in white deerskin, a wedding blanket Sarah knew, though she couldn't say how she possessed such knowledge. "I am Mourning Dove," the older of the women said in Apache, dismounting with surprising grace. "And this is Quiet Stream. We have carried this blanket since the vision of your coming was first spoken." She touched the white bundle with reverence. "It was woven by our grandmothers' grandmothers, waiting for the one who would bridge two worlds." Quiet Stream approached Sarah, her movements deliberate and ceremonial. "You wear the mark of the eagle spirit," she said, reaching up to touch the silver streaks in Sarah's dark hair. Just as it was foretold, the settlement bell tolled in the distance, the evening prayer call. Sarah tensed, knowing it would bring people to their porches, knowing her absence would be noted. Running Wolf seemed to sense her concern. "Fear has no place in what is to come," he said softly. "The eagle spirit guided me to you. It will protect what must unfold." As if in answer, a massive shadow passed overhead. The eagle from Running Wolf's vision circled above them, its wingspan blocking out the stars. Sarah felt something shift inside her, like a door opening to a room she had always known existed, but had never been able to enter. Mourning Dove began, unwrapping the wedding blanket, her movements part of a ceremony older than memory. The fabric seemed to capture the starlight, its white surface adorned with symbols that Sarah recognized from her dreams, eagle feathers, morning stars, and ancient patterns that spoke of harmony between earth and sky. "In times past," Quiet Stream explained, "when our people first walked these canyons, there were those who could speak with the eagle spirits. They were the bridges between the seen and unseen worlds. That gift was lost to us, until now." Abu. Women began to sing, their voices carrying harmonies that made the air itself seem to shimmer. Sarah felt the sound move through her like wind through canyon walls, awakening something profound and ancient in her blood. Running Wolf stepped forward, the sacred eagle feather in his hand now glowing with an inner light. "Among my people," he said, "a chief's marriage must be blessed by both earth and sky. The spirits have already given their blessing. Will you accept what they have written in the stars?" Before Sarah could answer, shouts erupted from the direction of the settlement. Lantern light bobbed in the gathering darkness, a search party, no doubt prompted by her failure to appear during evening prayers. "Quick," Running Wolf urged. But Sarah was already moving, not toward her cabin in fear, but toward her destiny with certainty. The women wrapped the wedding blanket around both Sarah and Running Wolf, binding them together beneath its sacred patterns. The ceremony that followed seemed to exist outside of time itself. Sacred words were spoken in rhythms old as the mountains. The eagle feather touched their foreheads, marking them as one in the eyes of the spirits. And through it all, the great eagle circled overhead, its cry drowning out the distant shouts of the searching settlers. As the final blessing was spoken, Sarah felt the last chains of her old life fall away. The curse that had marked her among the settlers was revealed for what it truly was, a sign of her different destiny, a power misunderstood by those who could not see with spirit eyes. Running Wolf lifted her onto his horse as the search parties. Lights drew closer. The wedding blanket now secured around them both, they rode into the darkness of the canyon lands. Behind them, Morning Dove and Quiet Stream disappeared like spirits into the night, taking with them all evidence of the sacred ceremony, all save the profound change that had been worked in the very fabric of two worlds. The journey through the canyon lands took them deep into a world Sarah had only glimpsed from afar. Her hand occasionally strayed to the silver cross hanging at her throat, her mother's final gift, worn smooth by years of worried touches. Running Wolf felt each time she reached for it, her body tensing slightly against his as they rode. "The path between worlds is never easy," he said as they paused to rest the horse near a hidden spring, "but it is sacred in its own way." His words carried the weight of personal knowledge, and Sarah remembered that he too lived between worlds, a chief who had learned the settlers' language and ways, even as he protected his people from their encroachment. Dawn was breaking when they reached the Apache camp, hidden so skillfully in a box canyon that Sarah would have ridden past it without notice. Women were already at work, their movements sure and purposeful. Children played among the lodges, their laughter echoing off the canyon walls. It was so different from the rigid silence of the settlement that Sarah felt her throat tighten with unexpected emotion. Running Wolf's sister, Red Willow, was the first to approach them. Her dark eyes took in Sarah's silver-streaked hair, the way the morning light seemed to gather around her like a visible blessing. "The one from the prophecy," she said softly, then smiled. "And wearing our mother's moccasins, just as she said. You would." But not everyone shared Red Willow's acceptance. As Sarah was led to Running Wolf's lodge, she caught the suspicious glances, heard the murmured concerns. Her fingers found the silver cross again, its familiar shape, a reminder that she had survived being an outsider before. "Your medicines," Running Wolf said later that day, presenting her with carefully wrapped bundles of her dried herbs, retrieved by swift riders from her abandoned cabin. "Red Willow is our healer. She has much to teach you, and perhaps much to learn from you as well." The days that followed fell into a rhythm as ancient as the tides. Sarah learned to grind corn with a stone metate, its smooth motion not unlike the mortar and pestle she had used for her herbs. Red Willow taught her the secret language of plants that grew in shadow and stone, while Sarah shared her own knowledge of healing. But at night, when the camp grew quiet, save for the song of crickets and the distant cry of coyotes, Sarah would hold her mother's cross and remember. Remember the sound of church bells, the rustle of Bible pages, the comfort of prayers spoken in English. Running Wolf would watch her in these moments, his face gentle with understanding. "The eagle flies between earth and sky," he told her one evening as they sat before their lodge. It does not forget one realm when it enters the other. Your old ways are part of who you are, just as they are part of your power. His words sparked something in Sarah's memory. The way her mother had often spoken of their family's old ways, hints of something that went beyond Christian doctrine. The silver cross had been paired with stranger teachings, watching the moon's phases, reading meanings in the flight of birds, healing with herbs that seemed to whisper their secrets. That night, Sarah dreamed of her mother. In the dream, she saw her clearly for the first time in years, a woman with knowing eyes and silver-streaked hair, speaking words that blended English prayers with older songs. She woke to find the silver cross glowing softly in the pre-dawn darkness, its shape transformed in her vision to that of an eagle with outstretched wings. Red Willow found her at sunrise, grinding herbs with tears on her face. The older woman sat beside her in silence for a long moment before speaking. "When I was young," she said, "my grandmother told me that the strongest medicine comes from the place where different waters meet. Perhaps it is the same with wisdom." Sarah touched the silver cross, feeling its familiar weight with new understanding. It was not just a remnant of her old life, but a bridge between who she had been and who she was becoming. Like the eagle feather that Running Wolf carried, it was a symbol of something larger than the sum of its parts, as if summoned by her thoughts. The great eagle appeared above the canyon rim, its cry echoing through the morning air. And for the first time, Sarah felt no divide between the world of her birth and the world that had claimed her. They were, she realized, merely different paths to the same sacred ground. 3 moons had waxed and waned since Sarah's arrival when Grey Fox appeared at the camp's edge, carrying a medicine bundle that had not been opened in 4 generations. The aged medicine man's arrival silenced the usual morning bustle, and Sarah felt the weight of destiny settle around her shoulders like a heavy blanket. "It is time," Grey Fox announced, his voice carrying surprising strength. "The Council of Elders gathers. The one who walks between worlds must be tested." Running Wolf stood beside Sarah, his face composed, but his eyes betraying concern. They both knew this moment would come, the formal challenge that would either cement her place among the people or mark her as an outsider forever. The medicine bundle in Grey Fox's gnarled hands was wrapped in ancient buffalo hide, its surface dark with the oils of countless hands that had held it in ceremony. Sacred symbols had been painted on its surface with earth pigments: the eagle, the morning star, and other signs Sarah recognized from her dreams. "In this bundle," Grey Fox explained, as the tribal elders gathered in a circle, "lie the 3 tests of power that all medicine people must face. None have opened it since the last Bridgewalker was called to the spirit world. The signs say the time has come again." Sarah followed Grey Fox to the center of the circle, conscious of the many eyes watching her. Some, like Red Willow, held hope and encouragement. Others, particularly among the older warriors, showed only skepticism and suspicion. "The first test," Grey Fox intoned, carefully unwrapping one corner of the bundle, "is the test of seeing." He withdrew a small object wrapped in white buckskin. "In my hand lies something sacred. Tell us what you see, not with your eyes, but with your spirit." Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the familiar shift that came when she stepped between worlds. In her mind's eye, she saw not the wrapped object but what it contained, a stone carved with spiral patterns, taken from a sacred cave when the people first came to these canyons. "A speaking stone," she said, her voice steady. "It holds the songs of the first medicine people who walked these lands. The spiral on its face marks the path between worlds." A murmur went through the gathered elders as Grey Fox unwrapped the object, revealing exactly what Sarah had described. But there was no time to gauge their reaction before he moved to the second test. "The test of knowing," he said, producing a small leather pouch. "Tell us what sickness troubles Swifthawk's youngest son, who has grown weaker with each passing day despite our best medicines." Sarah felt her consciousness expand, reaching out like the eagle's wings to touch the boy's spirit. "His sickness is not of the body," she said, the knowledge flowing through her like water. He dreams of a dead twin, one who was never born, but whose spirit still calls to him. The medicine he needs is for his spirit, not his flesh. Swift Hawk's sharp intake of breath confirmed her words. His wife had indeed lost one twin before birth, a secret they had never shared. The final test brought Grey Fox to his feet, the last wrapped object in his hands larger than the others. "The test of power," he declared. "Show us that the eagle spirit truly speaks through you." As he unwrapped the object, a fan of eagle feathers bound with sinew and adorned with sacred beads, Sarah felt a familiar presence. The great eagle that had watched over her marriage ceremony appeared as if summoned, landing on a nearby rock with a cry that echoed through the canyon. The massive bird's appearance caused even the most stoic elders to stir, but what followed left them truly shaken. Sarah found herself speaking in a voice that was both hers and not hers, sharing wisdom in the ancient language of the Apache, words she had never learned, but somehow knew to her bones. When the eagle finally took flight, Grey Fox rewrapped the medicine bundle with trembling hands. "The tests are complete," he announced. "The prophecy speaks true. She is a bridge-walker, blessed by the eagle spirit, and her medicine is true." Running Wolf stepped forward then, pride evident in his bearing. But before he could speak, an elder named Stone Bear rose to his feet. "The tests may be passed," he said gravely, "but the true trial is yet to come. The soldiers move closer to our hunting grounds each day. The settlers push deeper into our territory. Can we trust one who comes from their world, no matter what powers she holds?" Sarah felt the fragile acceptance she had just earned waver like a flame in the wind. She touched her silver cross, then looked up at the sky where the eagle had vanished. The path between worlds, she realized, would always require careful balance, and this was only the first step. In the deepest part of night, when even the owls had fallen silent, Sarah sat before an ancient ceremonial drum in Grey Fox's medicine lodge. Its surface, worn smooth by generations of sacred rhythms, bore the painted image of an eagle with lightning flowing from its wings. The old medicine man had brought it out after a vision told him the time had come for Sarah to learn the shadow. Dances, ceremonies so powerful they were performed only in darkness. "This drum," Grey Fox said, his voice barely above a whisper, "has been in my family since the time when our people first learned to speak with the eagle spirits. Its voice can open the way between worlds, but only if the one who strikes it carries the true medicine." Sarah's hand hovered over the drum's surface, feeling heat radiating from the stretched hide as if it held its own inner fire. Since passing the elder's tests 2 weeks ago, her powers had grown stronger, more focused. But with that growth came responsibility that sometimes felt heavier than the medicine bundle itself. "The shadow dances are not like the healing songs you have learned," Grey Fox continued. "They are older, deeper. They speak to the parts of spirits that hide in darkness, afraid to face the light." As if in response to his words, the drum seemed to pulse beneath Sarah's palm. Images flickered through her mind, women dancing in firelight, their shadows taking the forms of eagles and wolves, medicine people of ages past, walking the thin line between worlds. "Your grandmother knew these dances," Grey Fox said suddenly, surprising Sarah. "Not your mother's mother, but her mother's mother, the one who came from across the great waters, carrying older medicines than even she knew." Sarah's fingers found her silver cross, remembering fragments of stories her mother had told her about their family's distant past. "The wise women," she whispered, "the ones who could heal with touch and see with closed eyes. The same power, different words." Grey Fox nodded. "The eagle spirit recognizes its own, no matter what songs they sing." He lifted the drum and placed it before her. "Now, close your eyes and let your hands remember what your mind has forgotten." Sarah's palms met the drum's surface, and the world shifted. The first rhythms came without thought, rising from some deep well of ancestral memory. They were unlike anything played in regular ceremonies, complex patterns that seemed to weave between heartbeats. As she played, shadows began. to dance along the lodge walls, taking forms that belonged to neither the Apache world nor the settlers' realm. Red Willow, who had been quietly preparing medicines nearby, gasped as the shadows coalesced into recognizable shapes. Women in strange dress dancing around stone circles, their movements matching the ancient Apache spirit dances with uncanny precision. "The old ones," Grey Fox breathed, watching the shadow play with intense focus. "They dance together, showing us what we forgot, that all true medicine comes from the same source." The drum's voice grew stronger, and Sarah felt herself sliding deeper into the space between worlds. Here, she could see the threads that connected all things: the settlers' prayers and the Apache ceremonies, the Christian cross and the eagle feather, the wisdom of both worlds flowing together like rivers, joining into a mighty stream. But with this vision came warning. In the dancing shadows, she saw dark times approaching. Soldiers massing in greater numbers than before, settlers pushing deeper into Apache lands, and tensions rising like storm clouds on the horizon. The drum's rhythm changed of its own accord, becoming the heartbeat of the land itself. Sarah's hands moved faster, drawing forth sounds that made the very air shimmer. The shadows transformed again, showing scenes of possible futures, some dark with conflict, others bright with hope. "The shadow dances show us what may be, not what must be," Grey Fox said, reading the concern in Sarah's face. "That is why. They are given only to those who can walk between worlds. You see the shadows, so you can help us find the light." As the last echoes of the drum faded, Sarah opened her eyes to find Running Wolf standing in the lodge entrance. His expression told her he had witnessed enough to understand the magnitude of what had just occurred. "The council must hear of this," he said, his voice heavy with both pride and worry. "Stone Bear and the others need to understand that your medicine might be our best hope for survival in the changing times ahead." Sarah looked down at the drum, its painted eagle seeming to move in the flickering firelight. The path between worlds had never felt more real or more dangerous than it did in this moment. A tattered piece of paper tumbled across the canyon floor, carried by a hot wind that tasted of dust and gunpowder. Sarah caught it as it brushed past her feet, her heart sinking as she read the military notice posted throughout the territory. "By order of the United States Army, all settlers are hereby warned that any Indians found off designated reservations will be considered hostile. Any persons found providing aid or comfort to such Indians will be subject to arrest and prosecution." The rest was torn away, but the meaning was clear enough. Sarah folded the paper carefully, tucking it into her dress beside her silver cross. Above, the eagle circled, its cry more urgent than she had ever heard it. Running Wolf appeared beside her, his face grave. "3 more hunting parties have returned empty-handed," he said quietly. "The soldiers drive the buffalo north, knowing it will force us to follow or starve." The morning sun cast long shadows across the canyon walls, like bars of a giant cage, slowly closing around them. In the month since Sarah had learned the shadow dances, tensions had risen steadily. Cavalry patrols ventured closer each week, while settlers pushed deeper into traditional Apache hunting grounds. "There's more," Running Wolf continued, leading her to where they could speak privately. "Swift Hawk's scouts report a new fort being built near the northern springs. They count at least 200 soldiers, with more arriving daily." Sarah closed her eyes, remembering the shadow visions from the ceremonial drum. "They mean to force a confrontation before winter," she said, the knowledge settling in her bones like cold lead. A commotion at the camp's edge drew their attention. Stone Bear and several warriors were returning from a scouting mission, their horses lathered with sweat. The elder's face was dark with news. Sarah could read even before he spoke. "The settlers from your old town," Stone Bear announced, looking directly at Sarah. "They guide the soldiers through our hidden passes. They tell tales of a white woman, held captive by savages, of dark magic and heathen ceremonies." A murmur ran through the gathering crowd. Sarah felt the weight of suspicious glances, saw doubt creep back into eyes that had only recently begun to trust her. The military notice in her dress seemed to burn against her skin. They use my presence here as an excuse, she said, her voice carrying clear and strong. But we all know the truth. They would come regardless, wanting our water, our hunting grounds, our very existence erased from these canyons. Grey Fox emerged from his lodge, the ceremonial drum in his arms. The shadow dances showed us this time would come, he reminded them. But they also showed us hope, if we have the wisdom to grasp it. Running Wolf moved to stand beside Sarah, his authority evident in every line of his bearing. My wife walks between worlds not to betray us, but to help us find a new path through dangerous times. The eagle spirit chose her for this very moment. As if in confirmation, the great eagle landed on a nearby rock, its wingspan casting a shadow that touched both Sarah and the gathered Apache. The bird's presence silenced the murmurs of doubt, reminding all who witnessed it of the power of the old medicines. We cannot fight the entire United States Army, Running Wolf continued, but neither can we simply vanish like morning mist. There must be a way to preserve our people, our customs, our sacred connection to these lands. Sarah withdrew the torn military notice, holding it up so all could see. This paper speaks their language of law and authority. Perhaps, she paused, an idea taking shape. Perhaps we need to speak to them in words they understand, while holding true to our own deeper truths. Stone Bear stepped forward, his earlier suspicion giving way to thoughtful consideration. And how does one speak peace to those who understand only the language of war? With medicine stronger than bullets, Sarah answered, touching both her silver cross and the eagle feather she now wore. With wisdom drawn from both worlds, and power older than any of their paper laws. The eagle took flight, circling the gathering once before heading north, toward the new fort, toward the gathering storm. As they watched it go, Sarah felt the drums of war and the rhythms of the shadow dance beating together in her blood, calling her to weave a new pattern in the fabric of both worlds. In the pre-dawn darkness, Running Wolf held his father's war shield before the sacred fire. Its surface, crafted from buffalo hide and hardened by ancient methods, bore paintings of power, an eagle grasping lightning, storm clouds heavy with rain, and symbols of protection passed down through generations of warriors. Sarah watched as he added a new mark to the shield's face, a silver cross intertwined with an eagle feather, their shadows forming a single shape in the firelight. The image had come to him in a dream, he said, a sign of new medicine for changing times. A shield guards more than the body, Grey Fox had told them the night before, when Running Wolf first spoke of his dream. It carries the prayers of the people, the strength of their beliefs. In times of greatest danger, such medicine can turn the tide of fate itself. The blood moon hung low over the canyon rim, staining the clouds crimson. Sarah felt its pull in her bones, remembering how the settlers had once blamed such moons for her supposed curse. Now she understood their true meaning, times of transformation when the veils between worlds grew thin. A horse's whinny broke the pre-dawn silence. Swift Hawk rode into camp at a gallop, his face grave with news. The soldiers move before. First light, he reported. They drive settlers' cattle through our hunting grounds, hoping to provoke an incident that will justify attack. Running Wolf's grip tightened on the shield. How many? 50 mounted men, with more holding position. Near the fort, they carry papers claiming this land was sold to ranchers months ago, sold by people who never owned it. Sarah stepped forward, her voice carrying the weight of both her old knowledge and new medicine. They choose the blood moon's time deliberately, she said. In their minds, it makes a better story. Savage Indians attacking good Christian folk under a demon's moon. Then let them meet medicine stronger than their fears, Running Wolf declared, lifting the war shield. Its surface seemed to absorb the moon's red light, the new symbol he'd painted glowing like living fire. Within the hour, the tribe had moved to their prepared positions. Women, children, and elders retreated to sacred caves known only to the people. Warriors took up defensive posts along the canyon walls, and at the center of it all, Sarah and Running Wolf stood with the shield between them, preparing medicine older than any of their gathered enemies could imagine. The first shot came with the dawn, a warning volley fired over the heads of Apache hunters returning from their grounds. The soldiers, resplendent in their blue uniforms, formed a line across the canyon's mouth. Behind them, Sarah recognized faces from her old settlement, including Reverend Harrison, his Bible clutched like a shield of his own. "In the name of the United States government," a cavalry officer shouted, "you will surrender these lands and report to the designated reservation." Running Wolf raised the war shield, its surface catching the rising sun. Sarah placed her hand beside his, feeling power pulse through the ancient buffalo hide. Together, they began to sing, her voice carrying the hymns of her childhood, the warrior songs of his people. The sounds wove together, creating something entirely new. The great eagle appeared as if summoned, casting a shadow that made the soldiers' horses stamp and whinny in nervous recognition of power they could not understand. Storm clouds gathered with impossible speed, turning the blood moon's lingering light into an unearthly glow. "Witchcraft?" Reverend Harrison cried, pointing at Sarah. "See how she corrupts even the sky with her devil's work." But nature itself seemed to answer his accusation. Lightning struck the ground between the two groups, though no natural storm. Cloud had released it. In that brilliant flash, the war shield's power manifested, every symbol painted on its surface appearing in the sky, written in light. The soldiers' neat formation dissolved as their horses reared and bucked, refusing to advance. The settlers who had come to watch their triumph began to retreat, their certainty shaken by powers that transcended their understanding. Sarah felt the medicine move through her like a river of light, neither Apache nor Christian, but something older than both. The shadow dances had prepared her for this moment, showing her how to bridge not just two worlds, but the very realms of spirit and flesh. Running Wolf's voice rose in the victory song of his fathers, but with new words that spoke of change, rather than conquest. The war shield thrummed between them like a living heart, its new symbol of unified powers glowing brighter than the blood moon's fading light. Yet even as the soldiers withdrew in disarray, Sarah saw the cavalry officer, writing in his report book, knew he would spin this tale into something that would bring even more forces down upon them. This was not an ending, but a beginning, the first clash in a battle that would require more than just medicine to win. The poison arrow lay before the council like a snake ready to strike. Its shaft was carved with symbols no Apache warrior would use. Its tip darkened with a substance that Grey Fox had identified as a mixture unknown to their people. Had Swifthawk's youngest son not spotted it, hidden near Running Wolf's lodge, the discovery might have come too late. "This was meant for the chief," Stone Bear declared, his voice heavy with anger and shame. "Or perhaps his white wife. The marks suggest whoever made it knows both Apache and settler ways." Sarah studied the arrow without touching it, feeling the malice emanating from its carved surface. After the confrontation with the soldiers 3 days ago, she had sensed a darkness growing within the camp, like storm clouds gathering in a clear sky. Now that darkness had taken physical form. "Black Rock," Running Wolf said quietly, naming his own blood cousin. The warrior had been increasingly vocal against Sarah's presence, and Running Wolf's new ways of dealing with the settlers. "Only he knows enough of both worlds to craft such a weapon." The assembled council members shifted uncomfortably. Black Rock was not just any warrior, he was the keeper of many old tribal stories, a respected voice for traditional ways. His opposition carried weight with those who feared change. Even necessary change would destroy their people. "Bring him," Stone Bear commanded, and warriors moved to obey. But when they reached Black Rock's lodge, they found it empty. His horses, weapons, and medicine bags were gone. "He rides toward the fort," Sarah said suddenly, the knowledge coming to her with the clarity of eagle sight. "He carries more than weapons with him. He carries our secrets." Red Willow emerged from the shadow of a canyon wall, her face etched with concern. Before he left, Black Rock spoke with many of the younger warriors. He told them that the Blood Moon battle was not a victory, but a sign, that Running Wolf's new medicine would bring destruction to our people. The poison arrow seemed to pulse, In the morning light, its shadow stretching towards Sarah like an accusing finger. She remembered the settlers' faces during the confrontation, their fear and confusion when faced with power they couldn't understand. BlackRock would know exactly how to turn that fear into a weapon more deadly than any poisoned shaft. He will. "And tell them I've bewitched you all," Sarah said, meeting Running Wolf's gaze, "that I'm using dark magic to corrupt the tribe's sacred ways. The soldiers will believe him because it fits what they want to believe. They will come in force," Stone Bear agreed. "Not just soldiers, but settlers armed with both bullets and beliefs. BlackRock knows our defenses, our secret paths, our medicine places." Grey Fox lifted the poison arrow with a leather wrap, his ancient face troubled. "This weapon carries a deeper poison than what stains its tip," he said. "It speaks of division, of the fear that change brings, even when that change is necessary for survival." Running Wolf stood, his war shield hanging heavy on his arm. "My cousin makes a choice that will echo through generations," he said. "But we too must choose. Do we abandon the new medicine that the eagle spirit has brought us? Do we reject the wisdom of walking between worlds because the path is difficult?" Sarah touched the silver cross at her throat, feeling its power flow into the eagle feather she wore beside it. The ceremonial drum's rhythms pulsed in her memory, showing her shadows of what might come. "The shadow dances teach us that light and dark must both be embraced to find true balance," she said. "Perhaps this betrayal is part of the medicine. We need to learn." Stone Bear's expression softened slightly. "Speak your meaning, Bridgewalker." "BlackRock betrays us because he sees only what might be lost, not what might be gained. He poisons the old ways by trying too hard to preserve them unchanged." Sarah stood beside her husband, her hand joining his on the war shield. "But if we can show our people and the settlers that strength comes from growing while keeping true to our core, that is medicine that no betrayal can poison." The eagle's cry echoed through the canyon as if in answer. Grey Fox wrapped the poison arrow in sacred cloth, transforming it from a weapon to a teaching tool. "Every medicine bundle carries things that can heal or harm," he reminded them. "The power lies not in the thing itself, but in how we choose to use it." As the council dispersed to prepare for what was coming, Sarah caught a glimpse of her reflection. In a still pool of water, the silver in her hair seemed to shine brighter, and for a moment her eyes held the same fierce light she had seen in the great eagle's gaze. The path between worlds had never been meant to be easy, but it was hers to walk, no matter what darkness rose to challenge each step. The hidden water pouch that saved Sarah's life had once belonged to Running Wolf's mother, made from the entire stomach of a young deer. It was crafted with medicines and prayers worked into every stitch. Red Willow had pressed it into Sarah's hands the night everything changed, when BlackRock's betrayal forced them to separate for the safety of the tribe. "The waters of life flow in hidden ways," Red Willow had whispered, showing Sarah how the pouch's decorative beadwork actually marked secret springs known only to the women of the tribe. "Like your power, sister. Sometimes what seems lost only runs deeper." Now 4 days into her solitary journey through the most desolate parts of the Canyonlands, Sarah understood the true wisdom of those words. The water pouch had led her to survival, not just through its precious contents, but through the knowledge sewn into its very fabric. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly as she crouched in the shadow of a towering rock formation. Her fingers traced the beaded pattern that indicated a spring should be nearby, though all she could see was sun-baked stone and scattered sage. But the medicine had taught her to look with more than her eyes. Closing them, she pressed her palm against the hot rock face. The silver cross and eagle feather she wore thrummed with shared power, and suddenly she could feel it, the whisper of water moving deep beneath the earth, following cracks and channels as ancient as the land itself. 20 careful steps to her left she found it, a tiny seep spring, drops of precious water beading on the stone like jewels. As she carefully filled the water pouch, Sarah reflected on how much she had changed since that night of separation. Running Wolf had argued against their parting, but Grey Fox's vision had been clear. The eagle must fly alone before it can lead others through the storm, the old medicine man had said. And you, daughter of two worlds, must find the strength. That comes only in solitude. The first night alone had been the hardest. Used to the sounds of camp life, the night silence had seemed to press against her like a physical weight. But gradually she had begun to hear other voices. The whispered secrets of night birds, the songs of wind through stone, the ancient stories told by starlight. She had expected to feel afraid, remembering the terror of isolation she'd known. In the settlement, instead, she found herself expanding into the solitude, like a flower finally given room to bloom. Each step taught her something new about herself and the powers she carried. The water pouch showed her how to read the land's hidden signs. Its beadwork patterns matched the way water carved through stone. The paths small animals followed too, secret springs, the shadows that marked underground streams. More than a container for water, it was a map of survival written in a language that spoke to both her Apache teachings and the older wisdom she'd inherited from her mother's line. A shadow passed overhead, not the great eagle this time, but a common hawk. Still, Sarah saw meaning in its flight pattern, remembering how Running Wolf had taught her to read the sky's messages. The hawk circled 3 times, then flew north. Soldiers in that direction, the sign said. She would need to adjust her path. As she gathered her few possessions to move on, Sarah caught her reflection in the water she'd collected. The woman who gazed back was not the cursed outsider from the settlement, nor even the chief's wife who had channeled power through the war shield. This woman had been stripped down to essentials, rebuilt by sun and stone and solitude into something stronger. Her silver-streaked hair had come partly loose from its bindings, wild as the desert sage. Her skin had darkened under the sun, and her eyes held a fierce light that reminded her of the eagle's gaze. The settlers would hardly recognize her now, and that, she realized, was part of the medicine she needed to learn. The shadow dances had shown her glimpses of this transformation, but living it was different. Each step alone through this harsh land taught her how to be both strong and subtle, like water finding its way through stone. The hidden water pouch against her hip was no longer just a tool for survival, but a testament to the power of flowing between worlds, of finding strength in adaptation rather than resistance. Night was approaching, carrying with it the bone-deep cold of the desert. Sarah found a sheltered alcove and made camp, using skills that now felt as natural as breathing. As darkness fell, she unwrapped her precious water pouch and held it before her like a sacred text, reading again the wisdom woven into its surface. Tomorrow, she knew, she would begin the journey back to her people. The vision that had guided her into solitude was complete. She had entered the Valley of Shadows as a woman trying to bridge 2 worlds. She would emerge as someone who carried both worlds within her, as natural as the hidden springs, carried both surface and depths. The eagle claw necklace found Sarah at dawn. She woke to find the great eagle perched on a boulder near her camp, its presence as solid as the morning sun. At its feet lay a single massive talon, shed naturally and gleaming like polished jet. As she watched, the bird met her gaze with ancient knowing, then took wing toward the rising sun. Sarah's hands trembled as she lifted the talon. During her 7 days alone in the canyonlands, she had learned to read signs in everything from water tracks to wind patterns. But this was different, a gift directly from the spirit that had guided her journey from the beginning. Using skills learned from Red Willow, she worked through the morning to craft a necklace worthy of such a token. Strands of her own silver-streaked hair, stronger than any thread, bound the talon. Beads from her water pouch marked the cardinal directions. As she worked, she found herself singing ancient songs in languages she had never learned, yet somehow knew. The transformation began as she tied the final knot. Power surged through her body like summer lightning, and suddenly she was seeing through the eagle's eyes. The canyon lands spread below her in all directions, and she could perceive every detail: soldiers moving like ants near the fort, settlers' cattle grazing on traditional hunting grounds, and her own people hidden in their sanctuary valleys. But she saw more than just the physical world. Layer upon layer of reality revealed itself. Spirit paths that crisscrossed the land like silver threads, power places that glowed like buried suns, the ghostly shapes of ancestors walking their eternal rounds. Everything she had learned in her time alone, every piece of wisdom from both her bloodlines, crystallized into profound understanding. The curse was never a curse, she whispered to the empty air. It was a gift waiting to be understood. The silver cross at her throat pulsed in harmony with the eagle claw, their combined power showing her truths that bridged all divisions. The settlers' god and the Apache spirits were not separate forces, but different faces of the same great mystery. The wisdom of both peoples was meant to flow together, like streams joining to form a mighty river. Rising, Sarah began to dance, not the shadow dances she had learned in the medicine lodge, but something new that came from the depths of her awakened soul. Her feet moved in patterns that matched the spirit paths she could now see. Her hands wove symbols that spoke to both worlds she carried within her. As she danced, the very air around her began to shimmer. The great eagle returned, landing on a nearby pinnacle, and its cry harmonized with her song. Other birds joined. The chorus, hawks, ravens, even small desert sparrows, until the canyon rang with their voices. A small herd of deer emerged from hiding to watch, their eyes reflecting understanding of the power being born. Even the rocks seemed to respond, ancient petroglyphs beginning to glow with inner light as she passed them. This was the medicine the prophecy had spoken of, not just bridging worlds, but awakening the living power that connected all things. Sarah danced until the sun stood high overhead, each movement a prayer, each breath a blessing. When she finally stilled, she found herself changed in ways that went beyond physical transformation. The eagle claw at her throat had become warm as living flesh, its power flowing into her like water into dry ground. Now she could see the true pattern of what was to come. Black Rock's betrayal, the soldiers' aggression, the settlers' fear, all were part of a larger design, like the beadwork on her water pouch. And like that beadwork, knowing the pattern meant knowing how to work with it, how to weave new possibilities from existing threads. She saw Running Wolf in her mind's eye, standing strong with the war shield, waiting for her return. She saw Grey Fox in his medicine lodge, reading signs in the sacred smoke. She saw Red Willow tending to the tribe's needs, keeping the daily rhythms that gave life its foundation. They were all part of the pattern, all essential to what must come. The eagle claw necklace had given her more than power, it had given her purpose. The settlers had named her cursed, the Apache had called her blessed, but now she understood that both names fell short of the truth. She was a weaver of worlds, a dancer between realities, a voice that could speak to all peoples in their own tongues while calling them to something greater. Gathering her few possessions, Sarah began the journey back to her people. The eagle claw rode against her throat like a second heartbeat, reminding her with each step that she carried medicine strong enough to heal not just two worlds, but the very rifts in the fabric of creation. She was ready now, not just to return, but to become what the prophecy had promised. The sacred peace pipe lay wrapped in ceremonial cloth on the council ground, its stone bowl carved with symbols that dated back to the first treaties between peoples. Sarah had returned to find the tribe in turmoil. Blackrock's betrayal had done its work. The fort now held over 500 soldiers, and settler militias gathered like storm clouds on the horizon. "They send a message," Stonebear announced to the gathered council. "They offer peace talks. At the fort, the paper is signed by their commander and," he hesitated, glancing at Sarah, "the Reverend Harrison." Running Wolf sat beside Sarah, the war shield at his feet. Their reunion 2 days ago had been joyful but brief. Too much was at stake for private celebrations. Still, she felt his quiet pride in the changes her solitude had wrought in her. The eagle claw at her throat hummed in harmony with his presence. "It's a trap," Swifthawk declared. "Black Rock has poisoned their minds with tales of witchcraft and savage rites. They seek only to draw us out." Sarah touched the peace pipe's wrappings, reading the stories woven into its fabric. "Yes and no," she said, her voice carrying new authority. "They fear us more than ever after the Blood Moon battle, but that fear has two edges. Some, like Harrison, want blood. Others fear what refusing real peace might bring." Grey Fox nodded, slowly. "The Bridgewalker speaks truth. I have read it in the smoke. Their unity is as fragile as our own. Many settlers question the army's true purpose here. Even among the soldiers, there are those who remember other broken treaties, other needless wars." Running Wolf lifted the peace pipe, its surface catching the light like living water. "This pipe has spoken peace between peoples since the first times," he said. "Its medicine is older than our quarrels, deeper than our fears." "But how can we trust any peace they offer?" Stone Bear demanded. "Black Rock feeds their fears daily with lies about evil spirits and dark powers." Sarah stood, and something in her presence drew all eyes. The eagle claw necklace gleamed, and for a moment, those watching thought they saw shadows of wings at her shoulders. "They fear what they don't understand," she said, "so let us help them understand, not through battle, but through the kind of power that transforms fear into wisdom." She gestured to the peace pipe. "This isn't just a symbol of peace between peoples. It's a tool for opening minds and hearts." Running Wolf watched her with growing comprehension. "You have learned something in your solitude," he said. "Share your vision, my wife." Sarah knelt beside the peace pipe, unwrapping it with reverence. "When I danced with the eagle's power, I saw the pattern of what's coming. Black Rock thinks he can use their fears against us, but fear can be transformed, like water wearing away stone, like light penetrating darkness." She laid out her plan before the council. They would accept the peace talks, but on their own terms, not at the fort, but on neutral ground, not with weapons, but with medicine. She would go not as a chief's wife, but as a bridge between worlds, carrying both the settlers' Bible and Apache wisdom. "They expect either surrender or savage resistance," she explained. "We'll show them something they've never seen. Strength that doesn't need violence, power that heals rather than harms." Grey Fox lifted the pipe, examining its carvings as if seeing them anew. "The old ones knew this medicine," he said softly. "That's why the pipe ceremonies are sacred. They don't just make peace between peoples, they make peace between ways of seeing the world." Throughout the long council, the great eagle circled overhead, its shadow touching each speaker in turn. By nightfall, a decision was reached. They would send a response to the fort, accepting the talk of peace, but setting their own conditions. As the council dispersed, Running Wolf and Sarah stood together under the stars. "You carry more than just two worlds now," he said, touching the eagle claw at her throat. "You carry the possibility of a new way forward." Sarah covered his hand with her own. "The settlers called me cursed because they saw only darkness in what they didn't understand. Our people blessed me because they saw the eagle's power, but the real medicine is in seeing that both views were incomplete." The peace pipe had been rewrapped and carried to the medicine lodge, but its presence seemed to linger, a reminder of ancient wisdom that had survived countless storms of fear and change. As Sarah prepared for sleep, she felt the gathering tension of the coming days, not with fear, but with the calm certainty of one who had found her true power. The eagle's cry echoed through the night, a promise and a warning both. The storm was gathering, but so was a power older than any human conflict, deeper than any human fear. Sarah touched the eagle claw necklace and smiled, knowing that sometimes the greatest victories come not through force of arms, but through the courage to imagine a new way of being. The warrior's lance stood upright in the center of the meeting. Ground, its shaft adorned with both eagle feathers and cavalry brass, its tip catching the light like a star fallen to earth. It had belonged to Running Wolf's grandfather, who had taken it from a Spanish conquistador and remade it with Apache medicine. Now It served as the center point for the peace talks, marking the boundary between worlds. Sarah stood beside it, dressed in a way that spoke to both peoples. Her long skirt and white blouse would have been familiar to the settlers, but over them she wore a ceremonial blanket marked with sacred symbols. The eagle claw necklace rode at her throat, while her silver cross caught the morning sun. The delegation from the fort approached from the east, 50 mounted soldiers, led by Colonel James Barrett, with Reverend Harrison and 3 settlers' representatives riding alongside. From the west came the Apache group, led by Running Wolf and Stone Bear, with Grey Fox riding in a position of honor. Black Rock was conspicuous among the soldiers' party, his presence a dark mirror of Sarah's own position. He had dressed himself as a scout, but his eyes burned with the zealot's fire she had sometimes seen in revival meetings. "In the name of God and the United States government," Colonel Barrett began, but Sarah raised her hand, silencing him with a gesture that carried undeniable authority. "Before words of power are spoken," she said, her voice carrying across the space. "Between the groups, we will observe the old ways. The peace pipe will be shared, or no true words can follow." Reverend Harrison started to object, but Sarah was already moving, taking the sacred pipe from Grey Fox's hands. The medicine she had learned in her solitude flowed through her now, visible to all who watched. Even the most hardened soldiers felt something stir in their souls as she moved through the ritual. "You see," Black Rock's voice cut through the growing hush, "she weaves her witches' spells, mixing savage rites with Christian ritual to corrupt both." But Sarah had prepared for this moment. As she lit the pipe with an ember from the sacred fire, she began to sing. It was an old hymn, one every settler present would know, but she sang it in Apache words that carried the same meaning. The harmony of truth between different worlds made manifest in sound. The great eagle appeared then, circling the warrior's lance until its shadow touched every person present. Even Black Rock fell silent, watching as Sarah walked the circle of gathered leaders, offering the pipe first to Colonel Barrett. The colonel hesitated, years of military discipline warring with something deeper and older in his blood. Finally, he accepted the pipe, and as he drew in the sacred smoke, his eyes widened. For a moment, he saw the world as Sarah saw it. Layers of reality and meaning, the spirit paths crossing the land, the ancestors watching from every rock and shadow. One by one, the leaders shared the pipe. Even Reverend Harrison, after much internal struggle, took his turn. Only Black Rock refused, his face twisted with an emotion that went beyond mere hatred. "You fool yourselves," he spat. "She blinds you to the truth. The only peace these lands will know is when." His words cut off as he reached for a hidden weapon. But Sarah had seen this moment in the shadow dances. Before anyone could move, she grasped the warrior's lance, pulling it. From the earth, with a sound like thunder, power exploded from the ancient weapon, not to harm but to reveal. Every person present saw their own truths reflected in its gleaming surface. Soldiers remembered why they had first sworn to protect. Settlers saw the land's beauty they claimed to love. Apache warriors felt the wisdom of their traditions, calling for balance rather than blood. Black Rock alone seemed immune, raising his weapon with a cry of rage. But Running Wolf was faster, the war shield singing through the air to knock the gun from his cousin's hands. Stone Bear and Swift Hawk moved like wind, securing him before more violence could erupt. "This is the choice before us," Sarah declared, the warrior's lance thrumming with power in her hands. "We can see each other's truths, or we can stay blind in our separate darknesses. The eagle spirit shows us paths of power that don't require the destruction of what we fear." Colonel Barrett removed his hat, years seeming to fall from his face. "I've fought in too many wars," he said slowly. "Seen too many deaths that solved nothing. Perhaps it's time to try something new." The warrior's lance caught the sun again, and in its light, Sarah saw the pattern of possibility unfolding. But she also saw the darkness, yet to be effaced, the final challenges that would test all they had built here. BlackRock's hatred was a mirror for every soul who would choose fear over understanding, violence over growth. The great eagle landed atop the lance, its wings spread like a banner of hope and warning both. The real battle, Sarah knew, was only beginning, not a battle of weapons, but of hearts and minds and ways of seeing the world. The sacred rattle had been silent for 3 generations, its voice kept hushed since the time of Running Wolf's great-grandmother. Made from a lightning-struck gourd, filled with crystals from the heart of the mountains, and wrapped with the skin of a white buffalo, it was said to hold the power to shake the barriers between worlds. Now it trembled in Sarah's hands as storm. Clouds gathered above the peace ground. BlackRock had broken free in the chaos that followed his failed attack, and his voice rang out with words that carried darker power than mere hatred. "I call upon the spirits our ancestors feared," he shouted, his face transformed by something ancient and malevolent. "The ones that dwelt here before the people came, the ones that hunger for the old ways of blood and shadow." The earth itself seemed to shudder. Dark shapes began to coalesce around him, drawing substance from the fears in every heart present, soldiers, settlers, and Apache alike. Sarah saw them clearly with her spirit sight, ancient beings of hunger and rage, drawn to BlackRock's call like moths to flame. "This is what comes of mixing worlds," he snarled at Sarah. "The old powers wake, and they remember when all men were prey." Grey Fox stepped forward, his medicine bag open. "He speaks truth about their existence," the old man said grimly, "but lies about their meaning. These spirits were not banished because we feared them, but because they refused the great law of change. They are what happens when any power refuses to grow." Sarah felt the sacred rattle pulse in her hands, calling to be used. This was the moment the shadow dances had prepared her for, the reason the eagle had led her through solitude to understanding. She began to move, her feet following patterns older than memory. The rattle's voice rang out, not the dry shuffle of seeds, but the sound of creation itself. Thunder and wind, heartbeat and breath. Each shake sent ripples through the layers. Of reality she had learned to see, like stones cast into the pools of existence. Running Wolf raised the war shield, its surface blazing within a light. Stone Bear and the other warriors began to drum, their rhythms matching the rattle's voice. Even some of the soldiers and settlers, caught in the power of the moment, added their own songs, hymns and battle calls joining the growing chorus. BlackRock's spirits howled, their forms writhing as Sarah danced. The eagle claw at her throat burned like a star, while her silver cross pulsed in harmony with the rattle's song. She was no longer merely bridging worlds, she was helping to forge a new one, where old powers could transform rather than destroy. "You cannot defeat what you refuse to understand," she called to BlackRock, her voice carrying echoes of every language the land had ever known. "These spirits you call are not evil, they are stuck, like you, in patterns that can no longer hold. But we can help them change, just as we ourselves must change." The sacred rattle traced circles of light in the air, each sweep weaving the disparate powers present into something new. The great eagle manifested fully now, its spiritual form visible to all as it circled the gathering. Where its shadow touched the dark spirits, they began to transform. BlackRock screamed defiance. But Sarah could see his own power turning inward, consuming him as he refused to accept the necessity of change. She danced toward him, the rattle's song offering healing even to the darkness in his heart. "Cousin," Running Wolf called, lowering the war shield. "Let go of what was. Help us build what could be." For a moment, something flickered in BlackRock's eyes, a memory of younger days, of shared dreams and brotherhood. But the darkness had too strong a hold. With a final cry of rage, he turned to flee into the gathering storm. Sarah's dance reached its crescendo, the sacred rattle's power joining with every song and prayer being offered. The dark spirits began to shift, their ancient rage transforming into something else, a wild wisdom that could strengthen rather than destroy, change rather than consume. When the final note faded, the storm clouds had parted. Where black rock spirits had writhed, new forms of power danced, neither fully of the old world nor the new, but something that carried the strength of both. Colonel Barrett stepped forward, his military bearing softened by awe. "I've seen medicine shows in my time," he said quietly, "but this was truth itself." Reverend Harrison stood silent, his Bible held forgotten at his side as he struggled to integrate what he had witnessed with what he had always believed. Sarah saw the battle in his heart and knew it was being fought in every heart present, the eternal struggle between fear and growth, between holding on and letting go. The sacred rattle hummed softly in her hands, its power spent but not diminished. Like the land itself, it would renew its strength through change, through the endless dance of transformation that gave all true medicine its power. The peace treaty lay open beneath the morning sun, its pages containing words in both English and Apache. Unlike the stark military document Sarah had seen before, this one was illuminated with symbols of both peoples, crosses intertwined with eagle feathers, military seals beside sacred medicine symbols. She had spent 3 days helping craft it, ensuring every word carried power in both worlds. Not just a paper promise, Grey Fox had said as they worked, but a medicine bundle in its own form. The old man's fingers had traced the designs Sarah added to the margins, nodding approval at how she wove protection and understanding into every line. A week had passed since the confrontation with Black Rock and the ancient spirits. Search parties still sought him in the canyons, but the land itself seemed to have swallowed him. Some said he had become like the dark spirits he tried to command, a cautionary tale for those who refused the medicine of change. Colonel Barrett stood beside his horse, watching as Running Wolf added final marks to the treaty. The military man had changed since witnessing the spirit dance, his rigid bearing softened by new understanding. "Never thought I'd see the day," he murmured, "when army orders would include provisions for sacred grounds and spirit paths." "The world changes," Sarah replied, touching the eagle claw at her throat. "We can fight that change and be broken by it, or learn to dance with it and grow stronger." The great eagle circled overhead, as it had every day since the confrontation, its presence a reminder of the powers that watched and waited. Reverend Harrison approached, his face bearing the marks of someone struggling toward new truth. "I've been reading my Bible differently these past days," he said quietly to Sarah, "finding things I never saw before, stories of prophets who spoke with eagles, of wisdom that came from unexpected sources, perhaps. Perhaps God is greater than the box we tried to put him in." Sarah smiled, remembering her own journey from cursed to blessed, from outcast to bridge builder. "The greatest medicine," she said, "is the kind that opens our eyes to see what was always there." The treaty contained unprecedented provisions, protected lands for sacred ceremonies, shared councils for resolving disputes, recognition of both physical and spiritual boundaries. But its true power lay in the understanding that had made it possible, the shared experience of touching something greater than the sum of their separate traditions. Running Wolf completed his signing with a final flourish of eagle feather quill. "My grandfather would not have believed this possible," he said, rising to stand beside Sarah. "But he never saw an eagle dance with chapel bells or heard hymns sung in Apache tongue." Stone Bear, who had been among the strongest voices against change, stepped forward to add his own mark to the document. "The old ways remain strong," he declared, "not because we refuse to change, but because we learn to grow without breaking our roots." Sarah felt power pulse through the treaty as each leader added their signature or mark. This was more than a political document. It was a pattern for transformation, a medicine wheel for healing ancient wounds. She had woven protection into every page, understanding into every line, using skills drawn from both her bloodlines. Even the settlers who had once feared her most deeply had begun to seek her counsel, bringing sick children and troubled hearts to her cabin's door. They came warily at first, but left changed by the experience of meeting someone who could speak to both their Christian faith and the deeper mysteries that had always whispered at its edges. Red Willow appeared at Sarah's side, carrying a bundle of sage and sweetgrass. "The medicines grow stronger when we plant them together," she said, beginning the cleansing ritual that would seal the treaty's power. Just as people grow stronger when they learn from each other. The ceremony that followed belonged to no single tradition, yet honored all of them. Prayers were offered in multiple languages. Sacred smoke carried blessings from many sources, and songs of both peoples twined together like old friends meeting after long separation. As the sun reached its zenith, Sarah felt the layers of reality shift and settle into new patterns. The spirit paths she had learned to see now pulsed with combined power. Christian prayers flowing beside Apache medicine ways, neither diminished by the presence of the other. The treaty's final words caught the light as the latest signature dried. "Let it be known that on this day we chose to grow together rather than die apart." Simple words, Sarah thought, but backed by medicine strong enough to reshape the very fabric of both worlds. 1 year after the signing of the treaty, Sarah stood before her people, all her people, wearing a ceremonial headdress that had never existed before in either world. Its eagle feathers were bound with silver crosses, its beadwork telling stories in both Apache symbols and Christian imagery. Each piece had been crafted as a prayer, offered by hands from both communities. The great eagle had brought the central feather itself, dropping it at her feet on the morning of the ceremony. Grey Fox had wept when he saw it, recognizing it as the same feather from Running Wolf's vision quest so many moons ago. The circle was complete. "Once they called me cursed," Sarah said, her voice carrying to all who had gathered for the first shared ceremony of its kind. "Now they call me blessed. But the truth is I am simply who I was always meant to be, a bridge between worlds, a weaver of old medicines into new patterns." Running Wolf stood beside her, the war shield now transformed into a symbol of protection rather than battle. Stone Bear and Colonel Barrett sat together in the circle of leaders, their differences not erased, but transformed into strength through understanding. Red Willow had trained healers from both communities, sharing knowledge that made everyone stronger. The settlement no longer feared the canyon shadows, and the Apache had found ways to preserve their essential traditions while dancing with change. Where there had been walls of suspicion, there were now paths of exchange. Where fear had ruled, wisdom had found root. Children played together in the dust, their laughter a medicine that needed no translation. The old ones of both peoples shared stories, finding common threads in their separate tapestries. And in the high places, the great eagle still soared, watching over a land where different waters had learned to flow together. Sarah touched the eagle claw at her throat, feeling its power pulse in harmony with her silver cross. The ceremonial headdress caught the light like a crown of dawn, its shadows dancing with the same wisdom she had learned in solitude. She was no longer the cursed girl from the settlement, nor simply the chief's wife who had learned tribal ways. She had become something new, yet ancient, a medicine worker who could help others transform their own fears into strength. "The greatest power," she said, raising her hands to include all who watched, "is not in refusing to change, nor in abandoning what was. It lies in learning to grow while keeping our roots strong, in seeing with both old and new eyes, in dancing to rhythms that honor all our sacred songs." Above them, the great eagle cried out one final time, its voice carrying an eternal blessing. And in that cry, all who heard it understood that some medicines are bigger than any one tradition, some truths deeper than any single way of seeing, and some loves strong enough to transform entire worlds.